Kia ora koutou katoa. Good afternoon. Today I have a short update on the numbers at our managed isolation and quarantine facilities, and I'll briefly comment on calls to open our borders before I'm then happy to take your questions. As of early today, our facilities have 4,858 beds occupied, out of a total capacity of 6,103. So we currently have 1,245 spare beds. We're expecting 2,751 arrivals this week, with 1,759 departures from our facilities, leaving 253 spare beds. However, we're also aiming to open 4 more facilities this week, with 897 beds in total, providing backup of around 1,150 spare beds and capacity. These steps are consistent with our plan to ramp up quarantine capacity to match the inflow of New Zealanders returning back as the virus grows around the world, while giving ourselves a buffer of spare capacity, keeping in mind we do still have a level of uncertainty from airlines around passenger manifests until doors close and wheels are up. I've seen today and across the past week calls for our borders to be opened to the world, a world where the virus is escalating, not slowing, and not even peaking in some countries yet, where cases exceed 10 million globally and deaths 500,000, where countries are extending and returning to lockdown. All the while, we get to enjoy weekend sport, go to restaurants and bars, our workplaces are open, and we can gather in whatever numbers we like. These are hard-won gains, and we have, as a government, no intention of squandering them. The idea that we should open our border in this environment has a price, and that price could be a second wave of COVID-19 in our country. At worst, at best, added restrictions for the rest of us. Yes, we want to open our borders as soon as it is safe to do so, and we have been in the enviable position of investigating and undertaking work with Australia and in the Pacific. Where there are safe opportunities, we will pursue them. But first and foremost, we are trying to preserve a COVID-free position while getting our economy moving. But while the EU is looking to open its doors to a handful of countries, including our own, I'm reminded that New Zealanders returning from trips offshore were part of the spread of the virus in New Zealand in the first place. There is a time in the future where we will be opening our borders, but to suggest that time is now, when the virus is getting worse, is frankly dangerous. What we can do is continue to increase our capacity to accommodate New Zealanders who need to get back here, those who have loved ones to care for, job opportunities to pursue, a country that is their home and that is safer than most to return to. And we're firmly focused on increasing our quarantine capacity to do just that. I'm happy to take your questions.
Prime Minister, do you think that people who are suggesting that the borders should be opened sooner are being irresponsible?
I do think it is dangerous to suggest that we open up our borders at this point in time. This pandemic globally is growing. The reason New Zealanders have the freedom we have and that we've been able to domestically open up our economy has been because we have kept our borders so tight.
Todd Muller complained to us this morning that the National Party and the opposition is not being consulted enough on what the forward planning is. And he said it's frustrating for them that they don't know what the government's planning in the future.
Oh, well, look, I don't think that that's a fair criticism. We have outlined very clearly that our goal, of course, is to focus on the opportunity that may exist with the Pacific and Australia at a time that's safe to do so. But I think he'll find that COVID-19 doesn't consult with anyone. We are having to work with a virus that globally is growing and make decisions based on what we are seeing around us. Our primary focus, however, is on keeping New Zealanders safe. My concern is the opposition's primary focus seems to be taking decisions that could risk that safety.
His complaint essentially was that they would like to be part of briefing that they're not getting. And he said they didn't have it at the worst of the lockdown, they're not getting it at the moment.
Well, again, I would push back, mostly in part because we have been very open about New Zealand's status. We've been very open about
Take them into briefing.
because I brief everyone at the same time, including all of you. We have sought to be entirely transparent as we've been going through what is an unprecedented experience for New Zealand. You'll remember that during lockdown, we were sharing case numbers a matter of hours after receiving them. The Ministry of Health is continuing to do that. We'll be sharing this week a quarantine dashboard to give an indication of what's happening at our border. And Barry, we've been very open about what our plans would be around the future of the border. But at the moment, we are, as we see this pandemic growing, not in a position to give dates and decisions on something as significant as opening up a border when we are in the middle of a situation where it surges. So again, as I say, I do believe that they're getting information, but they're getting it at the same time as many people are.
Which hotels are those for new facilities?
We've tended not to necessarily just give out new facilities names, but you will have heard Minister Woods talk about extending into new centres, and that work has been done on the ground to ensure that not only are those locally informed, but there's work being done together to make sure that those areas are ready.
Why not share that though? Because doesn't that public and the community there need to be more aware and perhaps more vigilant?
Yeah.
Can you tell us areas?
Yeah, well, actually, we have, there hasn't been a complete absence. Actually, I should leave that to Minister Woods ultimately to answer, because we have, for instance, been sharing facilities where we've had cases, so there has been that level of transparency. But I'll leave that to her. She'll be the one that will have the contracted facilities and the details around them. That's not something, it's not something I have in front of me presently.
What about APEC? That's obviously now just going to be virtual.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that, and how much do we miss out on?
Yeah, so a couple of factors we have to take into account for APEC. Although the Leaders Week and the events around that are scheduled for the end of next year, there are a range of meetings that take place before that. And at the moment, there is just too much uncertainty as to whether or not a face-to-face meeting is going to be possible. And certainly, all of those preliminary gatherings, they just aren't going to be possible. So what we've done is we've determined that actually, for the sake of certainty, let's just plan for that virtual gathering. That means that we don't have the added cost, the added disruption that the uncertainty of COVID brings.
Potentially open up to Australia on a state-by-state basis.
You will have heard me say that is entirely possible, but again comes down to really the will of Australia. They at the moment have some states that have border controls and COVID-free status, but equally there are some states that are open and do not. We've set criteria that says basically we have to be assured that it would be safe, and we want that criteria to be met before we have any trans-Tasman bubble. So it will come down to Australia.
Can you deal with the state though, or does it need to have sign off from the Prime Minister?
I've been dealing with this at a federal level via Prime Minister Morrison.
Are you referring to the opposition when you're saying it's irresponsible to open the borders up now?
That actually wasn't. I used the word dangerous.
I'm sorry, dangerous, but because Todd Muller this morning didn't say that the borders should be opened up now. He said it might be reasonable to do so in the medium to long term.
Yeah, and it's for the opposition to articulate what it is their plan is, but I have seen suggestion of the borders being open, not just in public statements, but indeed the question I have in the House today.
On criteria for that medium to long term basis, opening those borders without the need to quarantine, is that something that is being looked at? Obviously, it's being looked at with Australia.
So in the short term, while we have an environment where we don't have large-scale effective treatment, where we don't have a vaccine, where we don't have short-term turnaround on testing, and while the pandemic is surging, that means in the short term we're looking for countries in a similar position to us, which is why we've been working on the trans-Tasman bubble. In the medium to longer term, it may well be that we see considerable developments in those 4 areas, and if that were the case, that may well change the perspective and position of New Zealand. But right now, that is not present. It does mean that it would be dangerous if we simply opened up our borders and relied on things like contact tracing. So I push hard against any suggestion we should do that.
That means if there are improvements in those areas, we could open borders with countries that have not, per se, eliminated COVID.
Again, those are just some of the factors that would need to be taken into consideration. But vaccine is part of it, the ability to treat, making the fact that the pandemic wasn't rampant, which it is now. There are a range of factors. To simply suggest all we need is good contact tracing to open up the borders is dangerous.
On
But what about
on
the
APEC.
opposite
Yeah.
of
Yep.
calls that we should close the borders to everyone, including Kiwis?
Yeah, and look, I've heard those, and that I think just demonstrates that there are a large number of people who sit in a very different position than what we've heard supported by the opposition at the moment. On that, we of course have said that that is not something that we have considered. It is simply not right to say that someone who has a legal right, as a citizen of this country, cannot come home. And for every case that someone is arguing against, that is someone's mother, that is someone's brother, someone's sister, someone's spouse. And we can't deem someone stateless, because if you remove their ability to go to the place they're able to legally reside, they could then become an illegal person somewhere else.
So do you think that some of the rhetoric...
On APEC,
And then I'll come to you, Luke.
on APEC, what is the economic impact of not hosting, and are you disappointed not to be able to host world leaders like Scott Morrison and Joe Biden in Auckland?
Yeah, and so look, there are of course, it's very speculative. No. So look, I'm just speaking generally around APEC. There are, of course, benefits to be had by holding a face-to-face meeting, whomever the world leaders are that at that time will be democratically elected to attend. However, this is a period of uncertainty. We just simply can't guarantee what will be possible by the end of next year, but also it's actually all of the work that's done in the lead up by officials, hundreds and hundreds of engagements that start very, very shortly. For us, we need to provide certainty as a host over how we'll operate, and that's what we're seeking to do.
Well, then
Prime Minister, do you think that the rhetoric around the border ramping up is getting to its own sort of dangerous place, where we're in a position where one set of New Zealanders could be pitted against another set of New Zealanders?
No, I don't think the idea of having a rigorous border regime does anything to say that those who are within it are somehow part of an issue. We need to keep them safe, but we also need to keep New Zealanders safe.
There's a bunch of expat New Zealanders out there who might want to come home who are feeling a bit unwelcome at this point.
No, nor should they. I mean, we're working very, very hard to make sure that we can cater for them. The answer that I just gave, it is their right to come home, and they are someone's loved one. They may themselves be in a very difficult position. Many may possibly have lost work. Many may have family members that they need to support. There are ample reasons why we need to continue to make sure that they can return, but to do so safely for them and other New Zealanders.
Prime Minister, you've restarted these.
I'll come here and then
You've restarted these media briefings. In the middle of at the beginning of the campaigning period. Do you anticipate continuing them? Close to the election itself, and do you accept that there might be perhaps issues with the amount of attention and media airtime that you get during the midst of an election campaign?
I guess you're asking the question of whether or not the difference between me standing on a podium and me standing on tiles, because that's essentially the difference. I do these briefings anyway, it's just whether or not they're longer form or shorter form. Well, we tend to from the tiles, I believe, from time to time. Look, the difference for us is there is still really critical information that we need to be sharing. COVID is not over. It's not going to be over for some time. So I still feel that there is that duty and responsibility to keep doing that. At the same time, we only have another 3 sitting weeks left, obviously, after that recess. So there'll only be a short period where we'll be in the position to be able to conduct them in this way. And I'll have to find other ways to continue on with that role that is appropriate.
Those 1,200 spare beds, roughly, there's capacity there to let more people in. Will you consider that?
No, well, again, we have to keep in mind that we are seeing considerable growth with the criteria we already have, and that is obviously citizens, permanent residents, those who are spouses, partners and dependents of those groups. And so at the moment, that spare capacity is not spare for long. At the moment, we are seeing an ongoing increase in the number of those groups who have a legal right to be here seeking to come home.
Those offshore temporary visa holders that have been waiting for quite a long time.
What was that, sorry?
What about those offshore temporary visa holders that have been waiting for quite a long time?
Yeah, and look, this is the reality of having, a really rigorous system at the border. It has meant that we have needed to ensure that while we're growing capacity, we don't lose the quality of the system. And that's what we're having to balance. Yeah, I'll go last question.
Did Cabinet give any consideration to seeking a deferral of New Zealand's hosting year beyond 2021?
Yeah,
obviously Malaysia had asked if they could be held over. Could we have gone to 2022 or even later?
So I think it's only fair to say we considered a wide range of options. If we weren't to host in this year and Malaysia were to move its hosting year, that has a knock-on effect for Thailand. That moves then countries into election years, which obviously is avoided. And so, yes, a range of options were considered, but a range of knock-on effects were created by that as well. Ultimately, I think we've made a balanced decision here. We are in a very uncertain environment, so we've created a certain solution.
Just
Okay,
quickly,
last one.
China's passed the controversial security law in regard to Hong Kong. Are they in breach of their international obligations?
No, look, we have taken a clear view that, in our view, this moves away from the one system, but two operations, two system kind of form of government. So we've made a very clear, given a clear view on that, and made statements to that effect. And of course, we see the disruption that has been created as a result.
What will New Zealand do now? I mean, will you join the Five Eyes partners in a statement? What's the...
We've made our, look, and I've said this multiple times, sometimes you'll see collective statements, sometimes you'll see singular, actually you'll see the same messaging, and very little difference between the Five Eyes partners on the positions we've all taken on this issue.
Condemn that law?
Oh, we wouldn't be issuing statements on it if we did not believe that it was acting outside what we have seen over the last several decades. Thank you.